phoenix palm decline. It affects Canary Island date palms, Mexican fan palms, and even cabbage palms are susceptible. And it has been reported in a few queen palm cases, but the majority were Canary Island, the Mexican fan palms, also called Washingtonian palms, and cabbage palms as well.
Now, how would you, obviously, if you suspect something, you get you out there. But if I'm walking around my yard, what is it I might want to look at that would cause me to call you?
Right. One of the first symptoms, an early sign of Texas phoenix palm decline is fruit drop. If you have palm trees and they just seemingly are just dropping those orange berries that they have in the queen palms in particular, if you just saw all of those just come off the tree within a couple days, that's absolutely not natural, and there's definitely something going on there. I would definitely get an arborist in there as quickly as possible. The other is a greater than normal amount of fronds dying in the lower portion of the tree. That's definitely a key that something is not right, and it would be a great indicator that you need to hire up an arborist to get out there and find out what's going on.
Is it the actual tree and the disease that kills the tree, or is it the tree gets vulnerable to insects? So if you saw a lot of insects crawling around the tree, would that be a sign that it's starting to rot or something?
It can be. Oftentimes, failure of a tree is not one particular thing. Often it's just the deck gets stacked in the favor of the other things that are not conducive to the tree's growth and development. So typically it's not just one thing. In the case of the Texas phoenix palm decline, that can destroy a tree very, very rapidly. There is, however, something that can be done about it. There's an antibiotic that can be injected actually into the tree that has proven pretty effective to increase the longevity of the tree. Currently, there is no cure for Texas phoenix palm decline, but the symptoms can be treated with an antibiotic injected into the tree approximately every 3 to 4 months, has shown pretty good results.
Is that an airborne kind of a disease, or how are they getting it from one tree to another?
The disease is actually spread by a leafhopper. It's a type of insect. It gets on the trees. It's a sap-sucking insect, so it pierces the tree of one that is infected, and they hop from tree to tree, infecting them as they go.
Just like the clippers that we were talking about.
Mosquitoes for people.
Absolutely.
Malaria and such.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think we realize that it's a living thing that actually has, I don't want to say it has feelings, but when you talk about, we were talking about cutting off a branch, and they have a trauma when that branch gets cut off, right? And they send all their little nutrients there to rebuild and whatever they have to do. And you think, oh my gosh, maybe there's something to this, talking to the trees and talking to your plants. I don't know.
There absolutely is something to that. And again, I want to give a plug to Christopher and Arbor Advocates. Christopher, why don't you give us your tagline, if you will, because I like that.
Well, at Arbor Advocates, we are tree pros that are pro-tree.
Right.
Our emphasis is on saving the trees when it's possible and when it's practical to do so. Cabling, bracing, lightning protection, all of those are things that we can do to help prolong the life of your tree. If it's special to you, it's definitely special to us as well.
And it is important to note that trees are living things, and without them, we wouldn't, because they convert the carbon dioxide to oxygen and keep us alive. Exactly. And I want to apologize right from the opening of the show when you blindsided me with that question, and I came up with this horrible answer of wood. That's pretty anti-tree, and I apologize to all the trees in the world. I love trees. I have a very wooded yard, and I don't intend to use them for wood.
There we go. Every tree forgives you for that. No, but it's really true. We used trees years ago. If you go to any place that has farmhouses, it can be a complete desolate of farmland as far as just crops, and then you see the farmhouse and a shade tree, because the trees have been part of our foundation, our society, and everything. And I don't think we really give enough credit to people like yourself that are out there trying to salvage the good trees and trying to make the best of what we have and not have because there's been all these different things that have happened over the 30 or 40 years that I've been in South Florida and here that you hear of. Well, there for a while it was those fruit trees. They get a disease, and next thing you know, your neighbors get it, and down the street, and it can completely destroy the crops as well. So there's a lot to learn. I want to call you doctor.
That's not too far off, actually, because doctors, they see the patient, they assess the patient, they make a diagnosis, and then they prescribe a treatment, and then follow up as necessary. And arborists do exactly the same thing. We go out, we assess the patient, which is our tree. We look for signs and symptoms. We, make a diagnosis, and then we prescribe a treatment, whether it be fertilizer or some type of inoculation, a fungicide or antibiotic. And then we follow up to make sure that the treatment's being effective. If not, we may need to change our course of action entirely.
Do you have one or two things that people don't know about certified arborists that you would, I think they'd find interesting? And I'll give you the hint on the one that I want you to mention is the beach and what you can, only certified arborists are allowed to do something on the beach.
Absolutely. Certified arborists are the only ones that are actually legally allowed to trim mangroves in the state of Florida. And I believe it's federal, but I know in the state of Florida that we are the only ones who are allowed to do mangrove trees and trimming and maintenance of them.
Why would that be?
Well, because they're protected tree species.
Okay.
And on the beach in particular, in coastal areas, they actually help hold the sand together in the coastal regions. There's actually 3 different kinds of mangroves. They're white, black, and red. And how you can identify them is where they are in relation to the water.
I remember that from my sea camp days back in when we took our trip down to the Keys and walked the mangrove swamps. And that applies to the mangroves along the Indian River. Is that correct?
That's
or the
correct.
Ocean as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah, very good.
All the mangroves.
Now, that might be another interesting topic, too, that there's certain things by nature follow suit along maybe, say, the Indian River. But when you take another tree that's not supposed to be in a wet soil like that and you put them there, the dropping of their fronds and so forth into the Indian River or any kind of a body of water can completely change the acid and tone and everything of it.
Absolutely.
So we never, don't mess around with Mother Nature.
Well, what's important is to, again, I don't know if the big box stores are who we're buying these trees from, but it's important that we don't bring in these invasive species or that we don't bring in the wrong tree for the wrong area. Are there any warnings out there? Is there something that might be pervasive that our general public might not know? I go to, the big box store and I say, oh, that's a beautiful plant. Let me go ahead and plant that. Is there something out there that might be pervasive that's invasive?
Strawberry guava is actually a very invasive tree. People like to eat them and have them in their yard, but they can be very prolific.
Okay.
Right. On the other ones was the pepper trees we've been talking about. How
those nobody plants.
Nobody plants.
I don't know anybody who does, but
and
if
how
you do, stop.
Yeah, please. Or come take mine.
How do we get rid of those pepper trees?
Pepper trees really need to be cut to the ground and then ground. And even after that, the berries that come off of them, how the tree actually propagates itself, they get buried into the ground, and it can be quite a chore. It really is something that takes some time and some care over time to really get them gone out of your yard. Unfortunately, the birds like to eat them quite a bit, and so you may have gotten rid of them all, but if you don't keep a keen eye on your yard, your neighbor 3-4 houses down may have 1 or 2 or 20, and the birds are eating them there and dropping the seeds in your yard. So you got to really make sure you're putting a keen eye on your yard. Once they're gone, they may not be all the way gone.
It doesn't take long for a backyard to get overgrown into what Florida used to look like before we came through and chopped down some of this not mangroves, but all the underbrush and so forth. I can't believe how sometimes we go to a home that's maybe in a foreclosure state or something, and the backyard already looks like it's been taken over, because between the pepper trees that grow overnight and the weeds and different things, it's amazing how I always wondered, how do these cities ever get buried? Because you can't think of how a city in another country from 1,000 years ago, it wouldn't take long. I even see my brick pavers and things sinking into the ground, so it doesn't take long to get out of hand. Is there anything that you could put on, like a pepper tree? Would you suggest putting bleach on the roots or anything like that to keep it from growing again?
Well, if you cut the tree immediately and then spray the Roundup on it, that does a fairly decent job a lot of the time. To really get them, I would recommend the use of a chemical like Garlon, which in many formulations is a restricted use pesticide. I happen to have a state pesticide applicator's license, so I can use anything that is necessary to do that and do so correctly. But you may want to consult a pesticide applicator to take care of those kind of things if you're using something beyond what you can buy yourself at the store.
Right. For the listening audience, let's avoid too much do-it-yourself pesticides. We have enough problems without contaminating
it's
our
definitely best
water
to
supply.
consult
Absolutely.
an expert in that regard as well.
The other issue I'm having related to the pepper trees are Carolina creepers, maybe, or something. I got vines everywhere, and I don't know what to do about all my vines, but I just go pick them, and they grow back, and I pick them, and they grow back.
Yeah, the Virginia creeper has got
that's
5 leaves.
Yeah,
it kind of resembles like a poison oak, I think.
Yeah, that's the one.
But it's,
and it's all over mine.
It grows very rapidly as well.
And it likes to go up around the trees, because I've got that too. And all of a sudden you're pulling it, and you're thinking, where's this thing going?
When's it gonna end?
It just comes off. I wanted to make sure we touch a little bit on staging our home, since we're talking about real estate, and we always have our different staging people on and experts about how important it is to make your home look like a model home, because people are watching HGTV and they almost expect certain things when they go into a resale. So we always talk about staging and the inside, but it's very important to stage the outside, and that's usually the last thing you see on these before and after shows on HGTV. They spend the first 25 minutes talking about the inside, and then the last 5 minutes they show the outside and how different the house looks when you actually have someone that's designing it and has the right trees and so forth. How do you get into that? You help people find the right plants for their home, and I know you said you don't necessarily get into a lot of the design, but you certainly can recommend what trees would be best, because root structure is another thing that people don't take into consideration.
Absolutely. I would recommend keeping it as close to what is naturally found in the area as possible. Live oaks are always a great option in the right place. The live scrub oaks look very pretty when they're cleaned and thinned out, and then they don't get too crazy. They're slow growing trees, and I think that's always a good selection up front in the front yard.
Well, we only have another minute or so to go, but Jonathan and I always say our show's all about everything real estate, from foreclosures to feng shui. And there's something about feng shui on the outside of your house, too, as far as using the right trees. And one of the things we consulted with Elaine Bartlett, our feng shui expert, and she was suggesting, and I think we talked about this earlier, that you don't want to plant a tree smack dab in the front yard right in front of your front door. It doesn't probably look aesthetic anyway, but that's just not good feng shui for energy and so forth. And you had a suggestion about that as well.
Yeah, I would definitely not suggest planting anything right in the front door. The front door is the face of your home. I would probably plant 2 trees, maybe 2 smaller trees, an appropriate distance apart based on the species that you're selecting, to keep it balanced and keep it looking good, and keep that entryway clear so that it can be clearly seen from the house. Like you said, curb appeal sells.
Exactly. And another point that Elaine wanted to make sure that people knew about is winding walkways. That always is a nice curb appeal, whether you can have maybe a tree and an island or something like that in the front. And if you want more information about feng shui and trees and so forth, you can contact Elaine Bartlett at the Purple Portal 777 at gmail.com, and you can also listen to her show. here at Talk Network Radio on Tuesdays at 3 o'clock. So there's my little plug for our feng shui lady.
Love Elaine.
That's right, Elaine. So we thank you very much, Christopher, for joining us today. And one more time, give out your information on how someone might contact you.